I was sitting on my dock with a cold beer in one hand and my fishing rod in the other when I heard the sirens coming up my private driveway. The bass were biting that afternoon, and I had already pulled in 3 decent ones that were swimming around in my bucket. My lake, all 15 acres of it, sparkled in the June sunshine like liquid gold. I had purchased this property in rural Montana 3 years ago specifically for moments like this, away from the chaos of city life, away from nosy neighbors, and definitely away from the kind of people who felt entitled to control what I did on my own land. The squad car pulled up to the edge of my property, near the boundary where my driveway met the main road that led into the Whispering Pines community. I say community loosely because when I bought my 5-acre plot with the private lake, I had specifically ensured it was outside the HOA boundaries. My property bordered the HOA neighborhood, sure, but my deed was crystal clear. I owned this land outright. No covenants, no restrictions, no busybody association telling me what color I could paint my mailbox or how tall my grass could grow. 2 officers stepped out of the vehicle, and I could see them looking around with confused expressions. I reeled in my line, set my rod down carefully, and started walking up the slope from my dock toward them. The walk was about 200 yards through my neatly maintained lawn. I had mowed it just yesterday, not because any HOA demanded it, but because I actually took pride in my property. "Afternoon, officers," I called out as I approached. "Something I can help you with." The older officer, a stocky man with graying hair at his temples, glanced down at a notepad in his hand, then back at me. "Are you Lucas Martinez?" "That would be me," I confirmed, wiping my hands on my jeans. "What seems to be the problem?" The younger officer, a woman who looked like she was fresh out of the academy, was trying hard not to smile. The older one cleared his throat. "We received a call from a Mrs. Patricia Henderson. She claims you're fishing illegally on community property and creating a disturbance. She insisted we come out here immediately to arrest you for trespassing and theft of community resources." I blinked at them, processing what I had just heard. Then I started laughing. I could not help it. The absurdity of the situation hit me all at once, and I bent over, hands on my knees, laughing so hard my sides hurt. The younger officer lost her composure and started chuckling too. Even the older officer's stern expression cracked into a grin. "I am sorry," I said, catching my breath and wiping tears from my eyes. "But did Patricia Henderson, the president of the Whispering Pines HOA, actually call the police because I am fishing on my own private lake? On my own property?" The older officer nodded, his grin widening. "That appears to be the situation, yes. Though I have to say, in 23 years on the force, this is a new one. She was quite insistent, said you were stealing fish that belonged to the community and that you had no right to be here." I shook my head, still grinning. "Officers, I appreciate you coming out here, but I think there has been a significant misunderstanding on Mrs. Henderson's part. Would you like to see my property deed? I have got all my documentation inside." "That would be helpful," the older officer said. "I am Officer Reynolds, by the way, and this is Officer Chen. Nice to meet you both, though I wish it were under less ridiculous circumstances," I said, gesturing for them to follow me toward my house. "Can I ask, was Patricia herself who called, or did she have someone else do it?" Officer Chen spoke up, her voice still containing traces of amusement. "She called personally. She was very agitated, demanding we send units immediately. She said, and I quote, 'This criminal is brazenly stealing from our community in broad daylight, and someone needs to put a stop to this lawlessness before property values plummet.'" I snorted. "Property values? Of course. That woman has been a thorn in my side since the day I moved in. Let me guess, she is probably watching right now, waiting to see you haul me away in handcuffs. Officer Reynolds glanced toward the tree line that separated my property from the HOA neighborhood. There does appear to be someone standing at the property line with what looks like binoculars. That would be Patricia, I confirmed as we reached my front porch. My house was a modest 2-story cabin-style home that I had built myself with the help of some contractors. It had cost me a pretty penny, but it was mine, every square inch of it, and it was perfect. Large windows overlooked the lake. A wraparound porch gave me 360 degrees of Montana sky, and solar panels on the roof kept my energy costs minimal. I opened the door and invited the officers inside. My living room was neat but lived in, with fishing gear organized in one corner, a comfortable couch facing the stone fireplace, and my workstation set up near the window where I could see the lake while I worked. I was a freelance software developer, which meant I could live anywhere with decent internet, and I had chosen this slice of paradise specifically to escape the kind of nonsense Patricia Henderson represented. "Give me just a second," I said, heading to my office. I kept all my important documents in a fireproof safe, and I quickly retrieved the property deed, the survey maps, the title insurance policy, and for good measure, the letter from my real estate attorney confirming that my property was explicitly not part of the Whispering Pines HOA. I spread the documents out on my dining table, and both officers leaned in to examine them. Officer Reynolds ran his finger along the property boundaries marked on the survey map, then compared them to the legal description on the deed. "This is pretty clear-cut," he said after a moment. "Your property, including the lake, is entirely outside the HOA boundaries. The lake is completely on your land. You own it outright." "That is correct," I confirmed. When I was looking at properties in this area, the real estate agent showed me several lots within the HOA, but I specifically did not want to deal with association rules. I found this property, which had been owned by an elderly couple who passed away. Their kids sold it to me. The lake has been here for decades. It is spring-fed, stocked with bass and bluegill, and it is 100% my private property. Officer Chen was reading through the attorney's letter. "It says here that representatives from the Whispering Pines HOA attempted to claim your property should be included in their jurisdiction, but it was legally determined that your deed predates their formation, and your property was explicitly excluded from their covenants." "Exactly," I said. "When the HOA was formed about 10 years ago, they tried to incorporate all the surrounding properties, but the previous owners of my land refused. They had their attorney make it very clear that this property would never be part of any HOA. That is actually one of the reasons I was drawn to it." Officer Reynolds straightened up and pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. Responding to the call at 4750 Lakeside Drive. No criminal activity observed. Property owner has provided documentation proving ownership of disputed property. Situation resolved." The dispatcher's voice crackled back. "Copy that, Unit 12. Be advised, we have received 3 additional calls from a Patricia Henderson insisting you arrest the property owner." Officer Reynolds and Officer Chen exchanged glances. Reynolds keyed his radio again. "Dispatch, please note in the record that the property owner has provided clear documentation of ownership. The caller's claims are unfounded. If she calls again regarding this matter, inform her that filing false police reports is a criminal offense." "Copy that, Unit 12. I felt a surge of satisfaction hearing that. Patricia had been a constant nuisance since I moved in, but this was escalating to a new level. "Officers, I really appreciate you being reasonable about this. I know you have to respond to calls, even ridiculous ones." Officer Chen smiled. Part of the job. Though I have to say, Mrs. Henderson's call was pretty aggressive. She seemed absolutely convinced you were committing some kind of crime. She has had it out for me since day one, I explained, walking them back toward the front door. When I first moved in, she came marching onto my property. No introduction, no hello, just demanding to know why I had not submitted my house plans to the HOA Architectural Review Board. When I told her I was not part of the HOA, she practically had a meltdown. Officer Reynolds chuckled. I can imagine. We have had a few calls from Whispering Pines over the years, usually complaints about neighbors parking on the street or lawn decorations. Nothing quite like this, though. We walked back outside, and I could still see Patricia standing at the property line. She was a short, stocky woman in her mid-50s with an unfortunate haircut that looked like she asked for the manager special. Even from this distance, I could see her rigid posture and the way she clutched her phone in one hand and those binoculars in the other. "Would you like us to have a word with her?" Officer Reynolds offered. "Explain the situation." I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. "I appreciate the offer, but I have a feeling that would just escalate things. Patricia does not strike me as the type to admit when she is wrong. I will deal with her if she decides to come onto my property again." "Fair enough," Officer Reynolds said. "But if she continues to harass you or file false reports, document everything, you may need to pursue a restraining order." "I will keep that in mind," I said, shaking both officers' hands. "Thanks again for being cool about this." Officer Chen grinned. "Thanks for the entertainment. This is definitely going in our end-of-shift report. The guys back at the station are going to love this one." I watched them drive away, and as their car disappeared down the road, I saw Patricia lower her binoculars. Even from here, I could read the frustration in her body language. She stood there for another moment, then turned and stomped back toward the HOA neighborhood. I returned to my dock, picked up my fishing rod, and cast my line back into the water. The afternoon sun was warm on my shoulders, and a light breeze rippled across the lake's surface. This was exactly why I had bought this property. Peace, quiet, and the freedom to do whatever I wanted on my own land without someone like Patricia Henderson breathing down my neck. But I had a sinking feeling this was not over. Patricia did not seem like the type to let things go, especially not when she thought she was in the right. I made a mental note to call my attorney in the morning, just to give him a heads up about the situation. Better to be prepared than caught off guard. The base started biting again as the sun dipped lower in the sky, and I managed to pull in 2 more before I decided to call it a day. I cleaned my catch on the dock, tossing the guts into the lake where the smaller fish would make quick work of them, then headed inside to cook up some dinner. As I was seasoning the fish fillets, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw it was my neighbor. Well, my actual neighbor whose property adjoined mine on the west side, away from the HOA. His name was Bob, a retired Forest Service ranger who had lived in Montana his whole life. We had become friendly over the past few years, occasionally sharing a beer or helping each other out with property maintenance. "Hey, Bob," I answered, putting him on speaker so I could continue cooking. "Lucas, you are not going to believe what I just heard," Bob's gruff voice came through the phone. "I was at the hardware store in town, and everyone is talking about how Patricia Henderson called the cops on you for fishing. Is that true?" I laughed. "Word travels fast." "Yeah, it happened about an hour ago. She actually called the police and reported me for trespassing and stealing community property." "Can you believe that?" Bob let out a low whistle. "That woman is something else. I have lived here for 40 years, and I have never seen anyone as wound up as she gets." "What did the cops say?" "They were great about it, actually. They came out. I showed them my property deed and all the documentation, and they basically told Patricia she was filing false reports. One of them even suggested I might need to get a restraining order if she keeps it up. Good for them, Bob said, though I would not hold my breath waiting for Patricia to back off. When she gets an idea in her head, she is like a dog with a bone. I remember when she tried to tell me I could not have my woodpile visible from the road. I told her to take a hike, and she spent 3 months trying to find some county ordinance to use against me. Never did find one. Sounds about right, I said, flipping the fish in the pan. I am hoping she will cool off once she realizes the cops are not going to do her bidding, but I am not counting on it. Watch yourself, Bob advised. Patricia has connections on the county board. Her husband used to be some bigwig developer before he retired. She knows people, and she is not afraid to use those connections to get what she wants. That was concerning news, but I tried not to let it bother me too much. Well, I have got documentation, I have got the law on my side, and I have not done anything wrong. If she wants to make a big deal out of this, she is welcome to try. That is the spirit, Bob said with a chuckle. Anyway, I just wanted to check in and make sure you were okay. If you need anything, you know where to find me. Thanks, Bob, I appreciate it. After dinner, I sat on my porch with a glass of whiskey and watched the sun set over my lake. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink, reflecting off the water in a way that never got old. This was my sanctuary, my piece of heaven, and I would be damned if I let Patricia Henderson or anyone else take it from me. The next morning, I woke up early and made myself a pot of strong coffee. I had a video conference call with a client at 9, so I spent the first hour of my day reviewing code and preparing my presentation. As a software developer, I had the luxury of working from home, which meant I could set my own schedule and take fishing breaks whenever I wanted. It was a good life, one I had worked hard to build. At 8:30, just as I was pouring my second cup of coffee, I heard the sound of a vehicle coming up my driveway. I looked out the window and saw a white SUV with the Whispering Pines HOA logo on the door. My jaw clenched. This had better not be Patricia coming to start something. But when the door opened, it was not Patricia who stepped out. It was a man in his 60s, tall and thin with silver hair combed back from a receding hairline. He wore khaki pants, a polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on the chest, and an expression that looked like he had swallowed something sour. I walked out onto my porch, coffee mug in hand, and waited for him to approach. He stopped at the bottom of my porch steps and cleared his throat. Mr. Martinez, I am Gerald Henderson, president of the Whispering Pines HOA Board of Directors. So this was Patricia's husband. That explained a lot. What can I do for you, Mr. Henderson? Gerald's expression remained professionally neutral, though I detected a hint of irritation in his eyes. I wanted to speak with you about yesterday's incident. My wife was quite upset by your behavior, and I think we need to clarify a few things about community standards and expectations. I took a slow sip of my coffee, considering my words carefully. Mr. Henderson, with all due respect, I was fishing on my own private property. I was not on HOA land, I was not disturbing anyone, and I certainly was not doing anything illegal. Your wife called the police and made false accusations against me. If anyone should be upset about yesterday's incident, it is me. Gerald's jaw tightened. Now see here, Mr. Martinez. The lake you claim to own borders our community property. The residents of Whispering Pines have enjoyed fishing access to that lake for years. The previous owners never had a problem with community members using the lake for recreational purposes. That was news to me, and it explained a lot about Patricia's attitude. Mr. Henderson, I do not care what informal arrangements the previous owners may have had. I own that lake, it is on my private property, and I never agreed to let anyone from your community use it. If people have been trespassing on my land, that is a problem. Trespassing. Gerald's voice rose slightly. That is a bit dramatic, do not you think? We are talking about neighbors sharing resources, being part of a community. No, I said firmly, setting my coffee mug down on the porch railing. We are talking about property rights. I bought this land specifically because it was not part of your HOA. I do not want to be part of your community. I do not want to share my resources, and I definitely do not want people coming onto my property without permission. That is called trespassing, and it is illegal. Gerald's face was turning red now. You are being unreasonable. The Whispering Pines community has certain expectations about neighborly conduct. Just because you are technically outside our boundaries does not mean you can ignore the social fabric that holds this area together. Actually, that is exactly what it means, I said. Look, Mr. Henderson, I understand you and your wife are used to having control over your little neighborhood, but my property is not your jurisdiction. I am not subject to your rules, your expectations, or your approval. I suggest you go back and explain that to your wife before she does something even more embarrassing than calling the cops on someone for fishing on their own land. Gerald pointed a finger at me, his composure slipping. You have not heard the last of this. There are zoning laws, environmental regulations, water rights issues. We will find a way to ensure that lake is properly managed for the benefit of the entire community. You do that, I said calmly, and while you are at it, you might want to consult with a lawyer. Because if anyone from your community comes onto my property without permission, I will have them arrested for trespassing. And if your wife keeps filing false police reports about me, I will pursue harassment charges. Are we clear? Gerald stood there for a moment, practically vibrating with anger, then turned on his heel and marched back to his SUV. He peeled out of my driveway fast enough to kick up gravel, and I watched him go with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. This was escalating faster than I had anticipated. The Hendersons clearly thought they could bully me into compliance, but they were going to learn quickly that I was not the type to back down. I pulled out my phone and called my attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca who had handled my property purchase and had dealt with the HOA issues before. Lucas, Rebecca answered on the second ring. What is going on? I got a very strange message from someone at the county clerk's office asking about your property boundaries. Let me guess, I said. Patricia or Gerald Henderson. Patricia Henderson, yes. She was apparently trying to find some loophole or zoning issue that would give the HOA claim to your lake. The clerk's office told her there was no such issue and that your property lines are clearly established and recorded. How did you know? I filled Rebecca in on everything that had happened in the past 24 hours, from Patricia calling the cops to Gerald's visit this morning. When I finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Lucas, this is harassment, Rebecca said finally. What they are doing goes beyond just being nosy neighbors. They are actively trying to undermine your property rights and making false accusations. I think we need to take legal action. What kind of legal action? I asked, though I had a feeling I knew where this was going. We can start with a cease and desist letter. That makes it clear that their behavior is legally actionable and gives them fair warning to back off. If they continue after that, we can pursue a restraining order and possibly a harassment lawsuit. We might also want to send a letter to the HOA's attorney, if they have one, making it clear that the organization itself could be liable for the actions of its board members. Do it, I said without hesitation. I tried to be reasonable, but these people are not getting the message. If they want to play legal hardball, I am ready. I will draft the letters today and get them sent out by courier tomorrow. In the meantime, document everything. If anyone from the HOA comes onto your property, if Patricia or Gerald contact you again, if you see anyone suspicious around your land, write it down, take pictures, save any messages or emails. We need a clear record of their harassment. Got it, I said. Thanks, Rebecca. That is what you pay me for. Hang in there, Lucas. We will get this sorted out. After my call with my attorney, I had about 15 minutes before my client meeting. I used that time to walk around my property, checking for signs that anyone had been trespassing. Sure enough, when I got to the eastern shore of my lake, the side closest to the HOA neighborhood, I found evidence that people had been using my property. There were several well-worn paths leading from the HOA boundary to the lake shore, a few pieces of litter including beer cans and fishing line, and what looked like the remnants of a small fire pit. I took pictures of everything with my phone, documenting the trespassing evidence. Then I walked the boundary line between my property and the HOA land. I had survey stakes marking the corners of my property, and I noticed that someone had pulled up a few of them. More pictures. By the time I got back to my house, I was 10 minutes late for my client call, but they were understanding when I explained I had a property issue to deal with. The meeting went well, and I spent the rest of the day working on code, though my mind kept wandering to the situation with the HOA. That evening, as I was grilling a steak on my back patio, I saw someone walking along the lake shore on my property. It was a middle-aged man in fishing gear, carrying a tackle box and a rod. He was not even trying to be subtle about it, just strolling along like he owned the place. I set down my tongs and walked down to intercept him. "Excuse me, can I help you?" The man looked up, startled. "Oh, hey there. Nice evening for fishing, is not it?" "It would be if you were not trespassing on my private property," I said evenly. He laughed like I had made a joke. "Come on, man. This lake has been community fishing for years. Old Mr. Peterson never minded when we came down here. He even let us use his dock sometimes." "I am not Mr. Peterson," I said. "I am the current owner of this property and I do not allow trespassing. I am going to need you to leave right now." The man's friendly expression faded. "Are you serious? You are going to be that guy, the jerk who moves into a neighborhood and ruins it for everyone? First of all, I did not move into your neighborhood. Your neighborhood is over there." I pointed toward the HOA boundary. "This is my private property. Second, yes, I am serious. You are trespassing and you need to leave. Now." "Whatever, man," the guy muttered, but he started walking back toward the HOA side. "Patricia was right about you. You are a real piece of work." I pulled out my phone and took a picture of him as he walked away, making sure to capture his face and his fishing gear. More documentation for Rebecca. Over the next week, the situation continued to escalate. I caught 3 more people trespassing on my property, all of them HOA residents who claimed they had always used the lake and did not understand why I was being so difficult. I documented each incident and reported them to the sheriff's office, though I did not press charges. I wanted to give people a chance to understand the situation before I started getting law enforcement involved more seriously. Rebecca sent the cease and desist letters to Patricia and Gerald Henderson, as well as to the HOA's attorney. The response from the HOA's lawyer was professional but cold, basically saying their clients denied any wrongdoing and asserting that the community had established prescriptive easement rights to the lake based on years of use. When Rebecca told me about the prescriptive easement claim, I laughed. "They are really reaching, are not they?" "They are desperate," Rebecca confirmed. "But their claim has no legal merit. Prescriptive easement requires open, notorious, continuous, and hostile use for a statutory period, which in Montana is 5 years. Even if we accept that HOA residents were using the lake, that use was permissive because the previous owner allowed it. Permissive use cannot become a prescriptive easement. Plus, you have only owned the property for 3 years, which breaks any continuity even if their claim had merit before you bought it. So what happens now? I asked. Now we wait and see if they back off. If they do not, and if the harassment continues, we file for a restraining order. We have enough documentation to make a strong case. They did not back off. If anything, things got worse. Patricia started a campaign on the Whispering Pines community Facebook page, posting long rants about my selfishness and how I was destroying the community's quality of life. She never mentioned me by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. Some residents commented in support of her, while others pointed out that she was being unreasonable about someone else's private property. The online harassment extended to other platforms too. Someone created a fake Google review for my software development business, leaving a 1-star rating and claiming I was unprofessional and unethical. I reported it and got it taken down, but it was clear that the Hendersons or their supporters were trying to hurt me professionally now. Things came to a head about 2 weeks after the original incident. I was working in my office when I heard the sound of multiple vehicles coming up my driveway. I looked out the window and saw 3 cars, including Gerald's SUV and Patricia's silver sedan. About a dozen people got out of the vehicles, including both Hendersons, and they were carrying signs. I could not believe what I was seeing. They were actually organizing a protest on my private property. The signs said things like "Save our community lake" and "Stop private greed and access for all." I grabbed my phone and started recording video as I walked outside. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" I called out. Patricia was at the front of the group, and she had a megaphone. "We are exercising our First Amendment right to peaceful protest against your selfish destruction of community resources. You are trespassing on my private property," I said loudly, still recording. "All of you need to leave right now, or I am calling the police." "Let him call the police." Patricia shouted to the group, "We have every right to be here. This land should belong to the community." I was already dialing. When the dispatcher answered, I explained the situation as calmly as I could. "I have approximately 12 people trespassing on my private property. They are refusing to leave and staging some kind of protest. I need officers here immediately." The dispatcher assured me that units were on their way. I stayed on my porch, phone still recording, while the group milled around my driveway. Some of them looked uncomfortable, like they were not sure this was a good idea. But Patricia was in her element, using her megaphone to lead chants. "Whose lake? Our lake," she chanted, and a few of the protesters joined in half-heartedly. Gerald was standing near his SUV, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. I got the impression that Patricia had dragged him into this against his better judgment. It took about 15 minutes for the police to arrive, and this time it was not just Officers Reynolds and Chen. There were 4 squad cars, and one of them had a supervisor's markings. A stern-looking woman in her 40s stepped out of the supervisor's car and surveyed the scene with cold eyes. "I am Captain Morrison," she announced in a voice that cut through Patricia's megaphone. "Everyone needs to be quiet and listen carefully." The protesters fell silent, and Patricia lowered her megaphone. Captain Morrison turned to me. "Are you the property owner?" "Yes, madam. Lucas Martinez. This is my private property, and I have asked these people to leave multiple times. They are refusing." "Do any of these individuals have your permission to be here?" "No, madam. None of them do." Captain Morrison turned to the group. You are all currently trespassing on private property. You have 60 seconds to return to your vehicles and leave, or you will be arrested. This is your only warning. Now wait just a minute, Patricia protested, raising her megaphone again. We have rights. We are peacefully protesting an injustice. You have the right to protest on public property or on your own property, Captain Morrison said coldly. You do not have the right to trespass on someone else's land. 50 seconds. Most of the protesters immediately started heading for their cars. They clearly had not signed up for getting arrested. But Patricia stood her ground, Gerald beside her looking increasingly panicked. Patricia, let us go, Gerald said quietly, touching her arm. She shook him off. No, someone needs to stand up to this bully. 40 seconds, Captain Morrison said. Patricia, please, Gerald pleaded, but she ignored him. Officer Reynolds and Officer Chen were positioning themselves near the Hendersons, hands near their handcuffs. A few other officers were making sure the rest of the group was clearing out. 30 seconds. You cannot do this, Patricia shouted. This is an abuse of power. I know people on the county board. 20 seconds. Gerald was pulling at Patricia's arm now, practically dragging her toward their car. Patricia, stop this. You are going to get arrested. Finally, with about 10 seconds left, Patricia allowed Gerald to pull her back to their SUV. She was still yelling through her megaphone as he bundled her into the passenger seat. This is not over. We will fight this. You cannot win. Captain Morrison watched until all the vehicles had left my property, then turned to me. Mr. Martinez, I understand you have been having ongoing issues with these people. Yes, madam. I have documented every incident. My attorney has already sent cease and desist letters. I would strongly recommend pursuing a restraining order. What just happened here was not a peaceful protest. It was criminal trespass and harassment. If they had not left when I gave them the chance, I would have arrested every one of them, starting with Mrs. Henderson. I will talk to my attorney first thing in the morning, I promised. Good. Captain Morrison handed me her card. If they come back, call immediately. Do not engage with them, just call us. And I would suggest looking into security cameras for your property. Document everything. After the officers left, I stood in my driveway for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. A group of adults had actually organized a protest on my private property because I would not let them use my lake. The entitlement was staggering. I called Rebecca immediately, even though it was after business hours. She picked up on the third ring and I could hear her kids yelling in the background. Lucas, what happened? I told her about the protest and the police response. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Okay, this has gone way beyond normal HOA petness. We are filing for a restraining order first thing tomorrow. I also think we should consider suing the HOA and the Hendersons personally for harassment and trespass. They have caused you significant distress. They have interfered with your quiet enjoyment of your property, and Patricia's online campaign has potentially damaged your business reputation. How strong is our case? I asked. Very strong. You have documentation, police reports, witness statements, and now video evidence of mass trespass. A judge will take one look at this and grant the restraining order immediately. As for the civil suit, I think we can make a compelling argument for damages, both actual and punitive. Let us do it, I said. I am done playing nice. These people need to learn that actions have consequences. The next morning, Rebecca filed for an emergency restraining order against Patricia and Gerald Henderson, as well as a separate petition to enjoin the Whispering Pines HOA from harassing me or encouraging trespass on my property. The hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. In the meantime, I took Captain Morrison's advice and installed security cameras around my property. I put them at the main entry points, along the boundary with the HOA neighborhood, and at several spots around the lake. They were high-quality cameras with night vision and motion detection, and they fed to a digital recorder in my house as well as to my phone. Good thing I installed them when I did, because that very night, the cameras caught someone trying to vandalize my property. Around 2 in the morning, a figure dressed in dark clothing approached my dock and appeared to be trying to damage it with some kind of tool. The motion detection sent an alert to my phone, waking me up. I watched the live feed for a moment, then called the police. By the time officers arrived, the vandal had fled, but my cameras had captured clear footage of the entire incident. While we could not see the person's face, we could see their build, their clothing, and the vehicle they had parked on the road near my property. The license plate was visible for just a few frames, and the officers were able to trace it. The vehicle belonged to Patricia Henderson. That information changed everything. When we showed up for the restraining order hearing 3 days later, we had not just evidence of harassment and trespass, but also evidence of attempted criminal vandalism. The prosecuting attorney's office had already filed charges against Patricia for malicious mischief and trespassing. The hearing was held in the district courthouse in Helena, Montana's capital, about an hour's drive from my property. Rebecca and I arrived early and went over our presentation one more time. We had binders full of documentation, printed photos, copies of the police reports, and a thumb drive with the security camera footage. Patricia and Gerald showed up with their own attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Richard Thornton. I recognized the name. He was a partner at one of the biggest law firms in Montana, specializing in real estate and corporate law. The Hendersons were pulling out all the stops. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Judge Catherine Brennan. She reviewed the petitions quickly, then looked up at both parties. "This appears to be a property dispute that has escalated significantly," she said. "Mr. Thornton, I assume your clients contest the restraining order petition." "Yes, Your Honor," Thornton said smoothly. "My clients maintain that they have been acting in good faith to protect community interests, and that Mr. Martinez has been uncooperative and hostile toward reasonable neighborly requests." Judge Brennan raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Martinez, your side." Rebecca stood. "Your Honor, this is not a property dispute. Mr. Martinez's ownership of his property, including the lake in question, is well established and documented. What we have here is a clear pattern of harassment, trespass, and now criminal vandalism by Mrs. Henderson and others acting at her direction. The evidence speaks for itself." "Let us review that evidence then," Judge Brennan said. For the next hour, Rebecca walked the judge through everything. The initial police call, Gerald's threatening visit, the trespass incidents, the online harassment, and finally the protest and the attempted vandalism. She played the security camera footage of someone trying to damage my dock, and pointed out that the vehicle captured on camera was registered to Patricia Henderson. Thornton tried to poke holes in our case, suggesting the camera footage was inconclusive and that his clients had a legitimate grievance about access to water resources. But Judge Brennan was not buying it. "Mr. Thornton, I have reviewed Mr. Martinez's property deed and the survey maps. His ownership of the lake is unambiguous. Your clients have no legal claim to access his private property. Furthermore, the pattern of behavior documented here goes well beyond expressing a grievance. This is harassment, pure and simple." "Your Honor, if I may," Thornton started, but Judge Brennan cut him off. "You may not. I have heard enough. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, please stand." Patricia and Gerald stood, Patricia's face was flushed with anger while Gerald looked resigned. "I am granting Mr. Martinez's petition for a restraining order," Judge Brennan said. "Patricia Henderson and Gerald Henderson are hereby ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from Mr. Martinez's property and person. You are prohibited from contacting him directly or indirectly, including through social media or third parties. You are also prohibited from encouraging or organizing any further trespassing on his property. This order is effective immediately and will remain in place for 1 year, at which time it may be renewed if necessary." "Your Honor, this is outrageous," Patricia burst out. "That man is stealing from our community. Mrs. Henderson, if you interrupt these proceedings again, I will hold you in contempt," Judge Brennan said sharply. "Mr. Martinez is not stealing anything. He is exercising his legal rights as a property owner. Your behavior toward him has been unlawful and will not be tolerated. Do you understand?" Patricia's mouth worked silently for a moment, then she nodded stiffly. "Furthermore," Judge Brennan continued, "I am issuing an injunction against the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. The association and its board members are hereby prohibited from harassing Mr. Martinez or interfering with his property rights. Any violation of this injunction will result in the association being held in contempt and its officers facing potential criminal charges." Thornton looked like he had swallowed a lemon, but he nodded. "Understood, Your Honor. Good. We are adjourned." As we left the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had won decisively. The Hendersons could no longer legally harass me, and the HOA itself was on notice that any further interference would have serious consequences. But Patricia Henderson was not done yet. As we walked toward the courthouse parking lot, she broke away from her husband and attorney and marched toward me, ignoring the restraining order that had literally just been put in place. "You think you have won," she hissed, getting right in my face. "You think some piece of paper is going to stop me. I will make your life hell." "I will, Mrs. Henderson. You are violating the restraining order," Rebecca said loudly. "You need to back away from my client right now." But Patricia was not listening. She actually raised her hand like she was going to shove me or maybe slap me. That was when 2 courthouse security officers who had followed us out stepped in. "Madam, you need to step back," one of them said, putting himself between Patricia and me. "Get out of my way," Patricia shouted. "This man is a thief and a criminal, and someone needs to—" That was as far as she got before the security officers took her by the arms. Gerald was rushing over, looking horrified. Thornton was right behind him, trying to calm the situation down. "Patricia, stop," Gerald pleaded. "You are making it worse." But Patricia was beyond reason. She struggled against the security officers, still shouting about how I had ruined everything and stolen from the community and destroyed property values. One of the security officers pulled out his radio. "We need a deputy at the front entrance. We have a subject violating a restraining order and resisting security." Within minutes, sheriff's deputies arrived and Patricia was placed under arrest. She was still yelling as they put her in handcuffs and led her to a squad car. Gerald stood there looking like his whole world was falling apart, and I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "What happens now?" I asked Rebecca as we watched the squad car pull away with Patricia inside. "Now she gets charged with violating a restraining order, which is a criminal offense. Given that she violated it within minutes of it being issued and did so on courthouse property, the judge is not going to be lenient. She is looking at potential jail time." "Jail time," I repeated. I had not expected it to go that far. "Probably not much," Rebecca clarified. "Maybe a few days, possibly suspended sentence with probation. But it will go on her record, and it will make it very clear to her that this behavior has real consequences." Good, I said. Maybe that will finally get through to her. Over the next few days, word of what had happened spread through the community. Some of the HOA residents reached out to apologize for Patricia's behavior and to assure me they had never supported her campaign against me. Others remained silent, probably embarrassed to have been part of the protest on my property. Gerald Henderson resigned from the HOA board, citing personal reasons. I heard through Bob that their marriage was on the rocks and that Patricia was insisting she had done nothing wrong. She ended up pleading no contest to violating the restraining order and was sentenced to 10 days in jail, with 5 days suspended. She actually had to spend 5 days behind bars, which seemed to finally drive home the seriousness of the situation. When Patricia got out, she and Gerald put their house up for sale. I heard they were moving to Arizona, somewhere far away from Montana and the community she had tried so hard to control. I could not say I was sorry to see them go. With the Hendersons gone and the restraining order against the HOA still in effect, peace finally returned to my property. I installed better signage along my property boundaries, making it very clear that the land was private and trespassing was not permitted. I also worked with the county to have no trespassing signs posted at the entry points to my property. The trespassing incidents stopped completely. Without Patricia to encourage them, the HOA residents seemed to accept that they did not have access to my lake. A few of them approached me through intermediaries, asking if I would consider allowing limited fishing access for a fee or under certain conditions. I declined politely but firmly. My lake was my private sanctuary, and I had no interest in turning it into a community resource. Rebecca and I followed through on the civil lawsuit against the Hendersons and the HOA. Given all the evidence we had compiled, their attorneys were eager to settle out of court. The Hendersons personally paid me $25,000 in damages, and the HOA agreed to a settlement that included a formal written acknowledgement that my property was not subject to their jurisdiction, and a commitment to educate their members about property boundaries and trespassing laws. More importantly, the HOA agreed to add language to their bylaws explicitly stating that board members who engaged in harassment or encouraged illegal behavior would be removed from their positions and could be held personally liable for any damages. It was a significant reform that would hopefully prevent future Patricias from abusing their positions. With the legal battles behind me, I was finally able to enjoy my property the way I had always intended. I spent my mornings working on software projects, my afternoons fishing or hiking around my land, and my evenings watching the sunset over my lake. It was the life I had dreamed of when I bought this place, and nobody was going to take it from me. Bob came over one evening about 3 months after the whole mess had finally settled. We sat on my dock with a couple of beers, watching the fish jump as the light faded. "You know, I was not sure you were going to make it through that situation," Bob said, taking a sip of his beer. "Patricia was relentless. I have seen her drive people out of this area before." "She almost succeeded," I admitted. "There were times when I wondered if it was worth all the stress and legal fees, but this place, this lake, this is why I left California. I was not going to let someone take it from me without a fight." "Good for you," Bob said. "And you did not just win for yourself. You set a precedent. The HOA knows now that they cannot just bully people who live outside their boundaries. You did the whole county a service." "I just wanted to fish in peace," I said with a laugh. "Well, you earned it." As the summer turned to fall and then winter, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. I continued my work, taking on new clients and building my business. The incident with the HOA actually brought me some unexpected publicity. A local newspaper ran a story about the case, framing it as a David versus Goliath tale of a property owner standing up to HOA overreach. That article got picked up by a few national outlets, and suddenly, I was getting interview requests and even some speaking invitations. I declined most of them, not interested in becoming some kind of anti-HOA crusader, but I did agree to speak at a property rights conference in Bozeman. It was strange standing in front of a couple hundred people and telling my story, but they were receptive and supportive. A lot of them had their own HOA horror stories, and many said my case gave them hope that they could fight back against unreasonable association rules. One unexpected benefit of all the publicity was that other people facing HOA issues started reaching out to Rebecca. She ended up developing a specialty in HOA law, representing property owners in disputes with their associations. She told me she owed me a debt of gratitude for essentially launching a new practice area for her firm. "You should send Patricia a thank you note," Rebecca joked during one of our catch-up calls. "She inadvertently did us both a favor." "I think I will pass on that," I said, laughing. By the time spring rolled around again, bringing a new fishing season, the whole incident felt like ancient history. I had new survey stakes installed along my property boundaries, professionally placed and documented. I had security cameras covering every angle of my property. And I had legal precedent and court orders protecting my rights. But more than that, I had peace. Real peace, the kind that comes from knowing you stood up for yourself and won. One warm day in late May, almost exactly a year after Patricia had called the cops on me for fishing, I was back on my dock doing exactly what I had been doing that day. The bass were biting, the sun was shining, and a cold beer sat within easy reach. My bucket already had 4 good-sized fish in it, and I was in no hurry to head back to the house. As I cast my line, I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The stress, the legal battles, the confrontations. It had all been worth it to protect this place, this moment. Some people would never understand why I fought so hard for my privacy and property rights. They would see me as selfish or antisocial, but I knew the truth. I had worked my whole life to get to a place where I could live on my own terms, answer to nobody, and enjoy the fruits of my labor in peace. That was not selfish. That was the American dream. A fish tugged at my line and I set the hook with practiced ease. As I reeled it in, a nice 2-pounder that fought hard all the way to the dock, I smiled to myself. This was why I had bought this property. This was why I had fought to keep it. And this was why I would never regret standing up to Patricia Henderson and her overreaching HOA. The fish went into the bucket with the others, and I cast my line back out. The afternoon stretched before me, full of possibility and peace. Somewhere out there, Patricia was probably still complaining about me to anyone who would listen, insisting she had been right all along. But here on my dock, on my private lake, surrounded by my own land, none of that mattered anymore. I had won. Not because I wanted to hurt anyone or prove a point, but because I had been willing to stand up for what was rightfully mine. The law had been on my side, justice had been served, and now I could enjoy my property without fear of harassment or trespass. As the sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, I pulled in my last fish of the day. 7 total, a good haul. I would clean them on the dock like always, cook up a few for dinner and freeze the rest for later meals. It was a simple life, but it was mine and nobody could take that away from me. The lake rippled gently in the evening breeze and somewhere in the distance, an eagle called out. I sat back in my chair, beer in hand, and let the peace wash over me. This was worth fighting for. This was worth every stressful moment, every legal fee, every confrontation. Tomorrow I would wake up and do it all again. Work in the morning, fish in the afternoon, peace and quiet all around. That was the life I had chosen, the life I had worked for, and the life I had successfully defended. Patricia Henderson and her HOA had tried to take it from me, but they had failed. And as the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear overhead, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. I had stood my ground, fought the good fight, and come out victorious. My lake, my land, my life, all exactly as they should be. The end.